All right, so I'm so excited today to be joined by Mike Mikula, who's doing great things out there related to AI and Agentforce. And so, Mike, first of all, how are you today?
So far, so good.
Great.
And you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So yeah, so I'm in Tennessee. We've been dodging a lot of storms and tornadoes, and fighting with my insurance company about hail damage on our roof. And where are you located at in general terms?
Just south of Milwaukee, over in Wisconsin.
Okay, perfect. So I think I'm trying to think back to when you first got on my radar. I know you've posted a lot on LinkedIn, and the algorithm really features you in my algorithm a lot on LinkedIn because you're out there doing interesting things. And so, can you share with the crowd here that post that you posted, I think it was about 6 months ago, that really caught my attention because I think you had a real eye opener related to Agentforce and the possibilities with AI to do some interesting things in some non conventional ways as well.
Yeah, so gosh, yeah, that was around winter time. Yeah. I was working on a project for a customer where they had an experience cloud site that had a search engine, and they were curious about Agentforce and how they could make it easier for customers to find trips. And they just asked me, like, as an advisor, like, hey, would you be willing to POC an Agentforce demo? And they had a hookup with Salesforce to get it enabled in their org, which at the time, that was the only way you really could get it. So I was like, sure, this sounds like a fun opportunity. And I just kind of spinning my wheels with Data Cloud and trying to get Prompt Builder to work and see if there's, using their data tools and stuff like that. And I ended up finding out the best solution was to use Apex, an invocable Apex as an agent action, which funny enough, still like there's issues with it directly connecting to an agent. So at the time, and you can still see it, it's very biased towards using flows. Everyone tell you, oh yeah, you set up a flow for your agent if you're gonna do actions. And so I was like, no, I really want to use Apex because I used all these AI tools that can write Apex, that can't write a flow. And so what I did was use invocable Apex in a flow, and I had Cursor write all of the Apex that passes this parameters that are grounded into the invocable Lightning flow. And then the flow, I just duplicate those parameters so that it's consumable by the agent action that is part of the topic. And then what was interesting, because I had it all in code, I had Cursor take all of the code and then write all the instructions for the agent on how to use those parameters. And very quickly, within a weekend, I had a fully functional agent that could call those actions. And then I could train it from the conversations by just copying the conversation, pasting it in Cursor, and then it could just update all the instructions back to Salesforce. And I was even doing things where I had Cursor set up scripts so that it knew that when it changed the code, it deployed it to the Salesforce org, and then it ran the corresponding tests, and then it could train itself. And next thing you know, it's like it's just getting better as these conversations go. So that was like a cool breakthrough moment, and it's still how I work with Agentforce today.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing that. And I think what's interesting about you is that you are a seasoned developer and Apex guru. And I see a lot of those individuals kind of shaking their head at vibe coding or using, Cursor or other AI tools. And so I think it's so refreshing to see your perspective that rather than throwing shade at this new way of doing things, you really jumped in early and figured it out. And so, what has your journey been like as far as, take me back to when you first started experimenting with things like, I think you have been using ChatGPT for a while, and kind of give me that journey and the high level elevator pitch as to your development career.
Yeah. So I'll start the journey. So like I started with LLM ChatGPT 3.5 when it was only like 4,000 tokens. So it was a very small context window I had to work in. And it hallucinated. It took way longer to prompt it than it ever did to write the code. It wasn't always great. But then the models allowed bigger context windows. They 3.5 Turbo came out. It was like 16,000 tokens. And I was like, cool, I built a migration job all with AI. Now I could have wrote it faster, but it was just fun. And I like the curiosity side. And then when 4.0 came out, I was like, whoa, I just built an entire second generation managed package and literally put it through security review for App Exchange. They had some feedback. I copied the feedback and it fixed it all and sent it off to App Exchange. I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I'm writing all my code with ChatGPT. Now, at the time, it was a copy paste thing, right? I had to go back and forth. So that was like me learning how to work with an LLM to get what I wanted. But for the longest time, I was misled to be like, oh, AI just can solve everything. It was really the fact that I had all that experience to know how to ask it the right questions, like use dry, use solid, separations of concerns, like here's best practices for like how to organize Apex. I could give it my systems of thinking to give better results back. And the other thing you mentioned, there's like a resistance to this stuff, right? So I feel like vibe coding, like it was a coined term of like any AI use in coding, but I feel like there's a spectrum here, right? There's like I write all my code, AI assisted coding, and then vibe coding. Vibe coding being like I'm just to me vibes like I feel good about this. Just send it, see what happens. I don't even care. Versus AI assisted coding is like I'm an engineer and I'm going to take all my experience and help this like train somebody and guide them towards the solution, right? And I'd say I've done vibe coding like just to rapidly prototype something, but like when I'm shipping to prod is like I'm reviewing it all. I'm talking through it. It's my business partner, right? Like we're working together on this. Even if it writes every single line of code, I've looked at it and I've thought through it. And I consider myself a more of like an AI assisted coder for what I ship to prod. So does that kind of make sense? And I feel
Yeah,
like the resistance is coming because you think of the media, like the media is just constantly like AI is taking all your jobs or AI hallucinates and causes $1 million problems. And it's like, well, there's a delta between these two areas, and it involves like you being the human in the loop, like the system thinker that's kind of guiding the solutions that happen. And if you think about it, like say a really seasoned engineer is hearing AI is taking their job, well, now the bar is set so high when they try it, it hallucinates, and then they kind of say, no, this is all hype. They don't realize it's because the media is over, shared of what it's going to do without you actually having your input.
right, right. Yeah, this all excellent points. I think you have a really responsible and reasoned approach to this. And oftentimes, the people that complain about AI the most are those that want it really badly to not succeed, and they think that their opinion will keep the inevitability of it from happening rather than embracing it and figuring it out. So I love your approach in trying to figure out, okay, how can I take all of my knowledge and best practices and feed that into prompts? And before vibe coding came along, I was trying to make the term conversational coding a thing and even bought domain names around it. I was like, this is going to be a thing. And of course, the lesson learned is when you can do something with one syllable instead of five or whatever it is, go with that. But here you have the ability then to communicate well, and that's a soft skill that's very important. And then you were mentioning that era of copying and pasting, and that's kind of the era that I'm in. I spend a lot of time in Claude 3.7 extended, and I do a lot of things around self-assessment scorecards and practice tests and things that are more learning aids and not so hitting a back end or a server or anything like that. But I know you've mentioned often, like, you need to learn Cursor, you need to learn Cursor. So tell me about Cursor and your recent ambassadorship that you were granted.
Yeah, and I know obviously my bias towards cursors because it's been my tool of choice. People use whatever tool, suits you best. You want to use, the other ones that are out there, go ahead. I mean, I've referred plenty of people to use Lovable just because it's
Mm.
more friendly for non-technical people. And they've had great solutions. Some of my customers have had great solutions because they could talk to their developers by having it create a concept and then they could just go build it for them, right? So people should use whatever tool suits them best. But for me, Cursor as a developer has been awesome because it's like I went from the era of prompting where I had to get really good at telling LLMs to give me what I want, copy pasting, right? To using an agent, which Cursor has an amazing like reflection agent that you can not only just use an LLM in it, like whether you want to use GPT or Claude or Gemini, but it's an agent because you can give it tools like MCPs and you could give it scripts that it can learn with rules on how to use. So like you can make it much more than what you could with an LLM. So like for example, like with Cursor, they have indexing. So they actually index your code base up to like 50,000 files and build like all these metadata embeddings in a RAG that as you do a prompt, it can figure out what files it should bring into that prompt for context, right? Um, then there's a whole rule system where you, for your IDE, like you can give rules about like things that are true to you across all projects you work on. And then you can give it system prompt rules for each project that you could even check into version control so that anyone who pulls out that project your AI or your agent and Cursor is now aware of like the kind of code base it's in. And Cursor even now can generate rules for you. So as your code base changes, you can even generate new rules, and that's all built in.
Wow.
And so you can imagine, working with an agent's different than an LLM because an agent starts to get all these tools and concepts and context that can make it work much more efficiently. Because like if you think about an LLM, it's like it's a large language model, which means there's all this information out there, and your prompt engineering is what was trying to help it focus and narrow in those areas you want. But Cursor is kind of giving you the framework, right, to just kind of automate all that process so you can focus more like surgical on the prompts that you do give it, right? Um, and the whole vibe coding thing, right? When as soon as they added agent mode, you saw all these people. I just built a full stack app in 10 minutes, or yada yada yada. Now, the viability of that in production, right? Like that's where engineering is important. But it's because of things like that that it helped automate a lot of that process. And you asked about my role with Cursor as an ambassador, right?
Hmm.
Like that happened from me just I was honest to God, I'd get on a call like every week and just offer people to learn Cursor, just no relationship with Cursor aside from I loved it and I wanted to keep learning how to use it. And I just kept training people and just showing them because I wanted to know it better. And you know it better, you know as well as me. When you can train someone on something, you really know what you're talking about, right? And so I did a lot of that. Next thing you know, I was getting invited to conferences to speak at. I was creating a lot of good content that was getting well known. And I was giving a lot of good feedback to the Cursor team on their product. And they're taking some of it and actually implementing it. So it was natural that I then became an ambassador and helped them build that program that now we're rolling out publicly. And it's been great.
Wow. It's like I'm kind of blown away. It's like, I mean, I've heard of Cursor, but your explanation there was like, okay, I get it, because I've been working the copy paste era, and then also as well, I think it gives you a lot of flexibility beyond just working inside of Agentforce as far as it. And I'm kind of relating it to Agentforce because I'm familiar with grounding on knowledge articles or file uploads and that sort of thing. And in the free developer orgs, there's a lot of limits around that. It sounds like there's a lot of ability for the agents inside of Cursor to really get to know you and how you work and have your best practices. And you mentioned up to like 50,000 files, which is amazing. And so you mentioned MCP, a Model Context Protocol. For those that are new to AI and large language models, can you kind of describe what that is and why MCP is so important?
Yeah, so MCP being that standard of like how an LLM talks to like some type of service, right? So like it's just taking in JSON parameters that are grounded and then it registers itself as a tool. So like just kind of this almost like to some degree, like when I told you I built that invocable Apex that has parameters, like there's some of that's going on with an MCP. It's just the MCP could then it could be an integration, it could be a connection, it could be a script that's just running locally, but it's just a standard so that whenever someone tries to connect some service with an LLM, right, like it can use that as a standard. And
Okay.
in Cursor, like I've used it to like I built my own MCP just for fun where I could just talk to my LLM and it created a text list file, like for doing checklists that the LLM then would use to check off to work on a project. I've also used it to connect to databases or infrastructure like Railway so that I could deploy things into orgs. So there's all types of different ways you can use an MCP, but it's almost just like an HTTP, right? It's a standard for how you communicate.
Wow. Yeah. So the things you're describing that you're doing, I imagine you're so much more productive now. Can you quantify like the leaps and bounds of your productivity because of leveraging these tools?
I mean, gosh, there's things that would have taken me months to build. Like there's full stack apps that would have taken me months to build that I was like, oh, I prototyped this in a weekend and now I can understand like, is this a viable thing to go forward with, right? I mean, there's projects even with just ChatGPT that like would have taken me like 6 months. Like I originally had planned to take 6 months, but then 4.0 came out and I did it in like 2 weeks. And I was just like, whoa, like this is cool. Like I did a second generation managed package from scratch and launched that through App Exchange, through security review. And I thought it was going to take way longer.
Wow. So so I guess then with Cursor as well, you can kind of mix and match different models. And so I've seen you out there recommending different models for different tasks. Do you do you have any recommendations for which models should be used in certain contexts, or do you have an agent making some of those decisions? Because one of the things I get frustrated with ChatGPT is I'll start a conversation, I'll be three messages in, and then I'll realize, oh, I'm in the wrong model here, and it's like it should nudge me and say, hey, for that you might want to consider switching over to this other model. So I've kind of asked aloud before, why doesn't it just do that for me? But any thoughts in that whole? These are like really modern problems. Here we are, like bemoaning which model to use. But can you give the audience an idea as to, because there's a lot of acronyms. I know there's like O3 and all that, and Gemini, and even on the MCP side, there's A2A from I think Google or some other competing protocol out there. I guess the question, trying to get to the point here, is what are you finding gives you the best results for various tasks that you're doing?
Yeah, so obviously this stuff changes because even the
Mm-hmm.
older models get updated. Even 4.0 still gets some updates, right? So I know I shared a sheet with you where there's kind of a tree, a decision
Mm-hmm.
tree of like different models, when to use them. Um, I personally I'm a heavy Gemini 2.5 user Pro. And then in Cursor, they have a thing called Max Mode, which lets you get the full 1 million context tokens. So if you're not using Max Mode, you have to look at the models to see what actually token size you get. It could be 120 to 200, depending. Um, but I tend to drive most of my day with Gemini, and then if I have a lot of ambiguity, I'll use O3. I used to use 3.7 a lot, but the latest Gemini updates have just been so profound, like it's hard to go back. But then guess what Anthropic did today? They announced Cloud 4, and people are loving it. And they said some of the things they didn't like about 3.7, which was it's more creativity. Um, it required lots of planning up front in order to get it to drive. Well, apparently this new 4 is supposed to be more like 3.5, which is a very like you drive it to exactly what you want to do. And some people still stick with 3.5 for that exact reason. Like they want to have a lot of control over it. I've heard comparability though, like between 3.7, 4.1, and Gemini, like people will daily drive those three. Um, we'll see now. 4 just replaces all of those. I mean, that's just how this stuff is. And I tend to not look at all the benchmarks. I just say I put 100 hours into a model, and that's what I determine like my productivity from. Like sure, the marketing and all that stuff sounds cool. Like you see someone might, hey, I just built an app in 10 minutes, but it's like, what's really making you most productive? Because everyone has a different system of thinking. And these models are trained on different data sets that might be catered to different personalities as well. Like how you talk to it matters.
Right. Yeah, and I think we're seeing history repeat itself as well, because I saw a lot on LinkedIn and elsewhere. I think yesterday is when Google released AI video that has audio or voice as well. And it kind of reminds me of how in Hollywood there was the silent era, and then talkies came around. And so now we're 100 years later in the forefront of talkies with AI, and some of these things are readily apparent. Like when we first saw some of the video generations, they looked really bad. You see some of the memes of the actor eating the spaghetti, or Will Smith eating spaghetti, and how much better that got over time, and just realizing, okay, it's just a matter of time before all the sound effects are going to be in there as well. And so when you were mentioning those different models, is that mostly from a coding perspective, or do you use AI and your tool sets for other things beyond creating software, like any
Okay.
creative
Yeah.
pursuits?
And I know I kind of, I went pretty technical on all that stuff. Let me synthesize that. So like, 3.5 is I control that model. Like I have a high level of like my agency over that model. Like 3.7, 4.1, Gemini 2.5, those are planning creative models where you have to really give it a lot of context and planning for it to do what you want. Otherwise, it'll try to come up with something. And then O3 is like, I have this very ambiguous problem to solve, and it's really complex. I'm gonna let O3 think on that to give me a solution that I can pass over to my creative model to like do the busy work for. That's like how I look at it from a technical side. From a business perspective, I daily drive like just business questions or anything I want to learn about, like even HVAC or something like that, right? I might just throw ChatGPT 4.0 or O 04 mini high. And then sometimes O3 if it's really just a puzzling problem with like medical stuff. Like I've actually found better healthcare using 4.0 with web search. And like I thought like there's this one program with a local hospital I found. I didn't even know it existed, but I was able to do like 2 years of tests in one day. And I was like, this is incredible, right? I was like, and sure, it was like 2,500 bucks, but I mean, 25 bucks, 100 bucks for your health, like, what's that worth?
Good investment.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, I think it's really interesting talking to you because you're thinking about you have like this AI first mindset, and you're not. I see people go through. It's like the grief cycles, the 5 stages of AI grief is what I like to call it, and there's the anger and depression and bargaining, and then eventually you get to acceptance. You strike me as someone that just reached acceptance on day one. When did you first encounter AI in the real world, and what was that?
So like my first exposure to it was because of a hackathon where I was given an API key to 3.5 with a 4,000 context token limit. And I was like, how the heck did it do that? Like, how does it know? How is it answering these questions? It was so bizarre to me. But my curiosity drove me to like think about what can I do with this? Like, can I make it write code?
Okay.
Is that an example or like what
Yeah.
do you
So when was that? Like how early? Like was it
what?
2021, 2022? Like what
I
year?
think it was January of 2023.
Okay. Okay.
So about
So
it's yeah, it's been a
yeah. So
while.
I guess ChatGPT came out November of 22. So yeah. So it's very early on. That's interesting. So yeah. But I don't know. There are people out there that jump in and they're curious and they want to figure it out. And I think the thing for me that really struck me was its ability, just the generative nature of it. I was used to predictive AI, and I did a course on Einstein in the predictive models back in 2017 when it came out. And the thing that really intrigued me there was its ability to generate R code. I was like, huh, that's interesting because it's generating some code. So when I saw ChatGPT, I was totally blown away and I embraced it very quickly. And it just fascinates me, though, because people have such different outlooks on change in the future. And there are some, I guess, some areas that can cause some disruption if you start thinking about the future or it affecting your job or whatever. So I think, I've always been one to really try to look around corners and try to figure out, okay, how can I maintain being relevant? Because what I'm doing is not going to be the same in this AI era. So yeah, so I was just kind of curious where you first had that encounter. So that's cool. So you've mentioned a lot about creating managed packages, having clients, and tell me about what you do. You have your own business, and just tell me a little bit about what your sweet spot is and the relationship management. I think you give me the vibe that you care about the relationships more than the dollars. And so tell me about how you approach your career, your business, and just how you approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I've done all the different size companies. I've built and sold a company, like scale it to 1 million users, raised a few $1 million and sold it. I've worked at big tech. I've gone through an IPO with like when I worked at Compass. I went to Meta, but I realized like the problems I was solving there wasn't quite the right fit for me, right? So like I've done all that stuff, and what I'm doing now with like my own business is consulting on, whether it's Salesforce AI, like an Agentforce implementation, or Salesforce best practices, or using Cursor. I've done Cursor workshops. It's kind of just a broad range of things that I find interesting. So like I'm looking to either grow in myself with like real world applications of the things that I'm doing, and whether that's going to continue to be through my LLC or work with a company and build a product. It's just kind of open right now, right? So I just am driven towards like you don't get my resume unless I'm having fun with what I'm working on. And that's why when you hear me more relationship focused, like I want to work on stuff that's really fun and interesting to me because we're in a time right now, like you said, of a lot of change and ambiguity that like I want to get this right and not be like the dot-com crash and boom people that overpromised and underdelivered.
Excellent. So how can people get in touch with you? Website, LinkedIn, what do you recommend?
LinkedIn's usually the best. I mean, also my email, like mike@emberweave.com. I'm pretty responsive there as well. But LinkedIn
Okay.
is usually where most people start the conversation.
Okay, excellent. Awesome. Well, any final parting words of wisdom for those that I imagine there is a group that's excited about what you had to say, a group that is kind of feels overwhelmed, or where do I even begin? And so, any final words of wisdom for those in that overwhelmed crowd that might be feeling like they're late to the game, or they're too old, or they're too young, or they don't have the technical ability? What's your advice for those people?
You're definitely never too old because there's someone I befriended who he retired as a C# engineer, like 30 plus years of experience. And, he was kind of not interested in AI from what he saw and stuff like that. And after I talked to him and showed him some stuff, he's actually been experimenting and playing and actually finding a lot of joy in it. Um, I think it just depends what you want to do. Like we're going through an abstraction engineering, but like think of how many abstractions in engineering there's been in the last 50 years, right? Like when software engineering came out, like it wasn't the way that people built apps. Like people used to build it in the hardware. Software just made the abstractions so you could change it and make it more manipulatable, right? And then we had object-oriented programming, and then frameworks, and then Salesforce metadata, right? Like we're going through all these abstractions. There's always layers for us to like have input and creativity. Like AI doesn't know things that haven't been created yet, right? Like or they're super fresh or what it's not trained on. And I think there's always going to be areas for us to like put our systems of thinking into and like do something different. So it's never too late. And it's what's important is that you just have an open mind and you just play around and you create space to play. I feel like when we become adults, we stop playing. We're just like, well, this is the formality. I take this course. I have to take this paid course. I have to follow this instruction. Like there's a place for all these things, but like you have to play and you have to experiment. And that's the most important thing that anyone can do right now is create the time to play.
Love it. It's really akin to exploring outer space. There's so much to be explored that there's plenty of room for everybody. There's no need not to have a scarcity mindset. And I love that, making room to play, and the implications are profound. And you mentioned about the formality of taking a course and that sort of thing. Here I sit as online instructor, and I'm looking at, okay, how can we do things beyond courses? And that's why I'm creating self-assessment scorecards and learning aids and other things beyond just the video course, because frankly, people can ask questions of an AI and get answers. And so, and I think you took a few of my courses many years ago. When did you first discover my courses?
That was 2020 actually when I
Okay.
joined Compass. I was like, oh, I want to really understand some of these deeper concepts, and I just dove in and I was like, this is good stuff. This is
Awesome,
great.
awesome. So, and I think you, with that learning, you started with the admin administrator certification, but
Yeah.
and I think you told me, we had a little convo beforehand, that you'd been working in the ecosystem for about 5 years before you started going down the path of getting certifications. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So you had a lot of technical chops and a lot of coding ability, but you wanted to learn, I guess, the fundamentals of the platform, and that's how our paths crossed, it sounds like. So that's cool. All right. So I guess the final thing I'll ask you about are certifications, and not just from a Salesforce perspective, because Salesforce is changing the names of 35 of their certifications, and they're changing the certification experience soon. And I'm just thinking, I got a book coming out from O'Reilly about the admin certification. So believe me, we're going to be doing a lot of searching and replacing for that name change. And then all my courses, of course. But do you have any recommendations as to certifications, whether that's Salesforce or other certifications? Is Cursor going to have certifications? Just there's a lot of debate in that area as well. So I'm kind of curious what your take is on the whole certification game.
Yeah. So I think there's people who have definitely taken certification game just to say I have like 20 certs and it's like in and out. But I feel like when I took your certifications, I was like, I want to know what I don't know, right? I had a lot of responsibility. I was like, is there anything I don't know? And of the three certs that I did do, right? Like the admin certification, I feel like is the most essential certification anyone should have, no matter what your role is, because it gives you kind of like a blueprint of like Salesforce from like a bird's eye view, and then you can then make the decision of what area you want to go and focus in. So like for me, certifications are less about like proving I know something because I was doing that 5 years before I had certs, right? I proved myself into very profound positions without certifications, but taking them with the intention to know, right? Like that's what I think is key. And the admin one is again one of by hands by far the most important. From a cursor perspective, there's no plans that I'm aware of for certifications right now. We're just we just continue to share as much as we can and encourage people to share what they're doing with the product.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I've learned a lot and I love learning. Like you said, we learn by teaching, and you're a teacher at heart. Just really appreciate the enthusiasm and just hope we can keep in touch and just be checking in from time to time to see what next amazing thing you build. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
Likewise.